Mason and Dixon, Part 2, Chapter 0, Land of the Free. An analysis of Mason and Dixon on the title of Part 2, America, etc. Quote from William T. Vollmann's The Rifles, page 132. Quote, "So that's it, and we need not go into it any more except to say that while Freud says sometimes a cigar is only a cigar, a rifle is always something more than a rifle, just as the Jesuit cross is more than two metal sticks at perpendiculars. Or maybe that isn't it. We cannot say for certain which, if any, specific instances of starvation were caused by the abuse of repeating rifles. I think that the extracts I have assembled are suggestive, but am I, who was not there in the old times, being tendentious? My best advice to you, wherever you may be, is to look around you and ask yourself sincerely, is this continent getting worse?" End quote. Part 2, America. America. Not the United States of America, not North America, not South America, but America. The title poses an infinite number of questions and statements. What was America? What is America? What will America become? And how will Mason and Dixon lead America to its manifest destiny, toward the events that we will see emerge in Against the Day, Shadow Ticket, Gravity's Rainbow, V, The Crying of Lot 49, Vineland, Inherent Vice, and Bleeding Edge? These questions don't yet have full answers. Yes, we know what America was. It was home to two continents of indigenous people who had lived, hunted, reaped, and sowed, written and orated stories, created art, built homes in unfathomable structures, formed traditions and myths. It is, in the time of Mason and Dixon, a stolen country, but not yet to the extent that it will become. It was, quote unquote, found by Europe and taken from those who had already lived there for centuries. And it will become something that none at the time, not even the Royal Society, could ever have predicted. America will proceed through ages of war, industrialism, imperialism, emerging shadow leaders, the rise of the internet, the CIA, military interventionism, and the modern realm of Silicon Valley technology and artificial intelligence. Could Mason and Dixon coming over for a few years to just map a line for a property dispute truly have led to all of this? Oh yes, they could. As stated above, this also does not refer just to the United States of America, because yes, the horrors imposed on the Cherokee, the Seminole, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Creek, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Wampanoag, and other native populations in what we contemporarily call the United States was all horrific, but that ignores the similar horrors imposed on the Inuit, the Beothuk, the Mohicans, the Algonquins, the Erie, and those subject to the residential school system in modern day Canada and the Arctic. It ignores the genocides of the Coahuiltecan, the Yaqui, the Chantal, and other native populations in Mexico, and the Selknam, the Tupi, the Canoe, the Bora, the Andok, the Tapuya, the Goitaka, the Cayate, the Toba, the Mocovi, the Maya, the Zinca, the Pipil, the Lenca, and other native populations in the massive swath of land that is Central and South America. On the island territories, like the Kanaka Maoli of Hawaii, the natives of Samoa, and the Taino of Puerto Rico, and the Cabekar of Costa Rica. Each of these genocides and displacements took place in different time periods from before Mason and Dixon's arrival, during their stay, or long after their death. The name America is temporally independent. It is a place that is or was home to each of these tribes, so every instance of the hell they suffered is inherent in its name and in the actions of our characters. Mason and Dixon arrived in America on November 15th, 1763, completed their survey on October 19th, 1767, sent word back to England on June 21st, 1768, and began sailing back to England on September 11th, 1768. So their actions and observations here would only last for about 5 years. But, as reading, make sure to apply these same observations to the coming world, because Pynchon does not just observe events as is, but as events implied. Looking back at Part 1. Part 1 Latitudes and Departures served three main purposes. Firstly, to introduce us to the characters whom we've already spent quite some time with. Mason is the more serious of the two who pines and laments while consistently trying to be a better version of himself. Dixon is more carefree and outwardly indulgent, but possesses an inner dread, which he rarely shows. We have also met groups such as the Royal Society and other charter companies, along with various levels of the elite class like Maskelyne, Bradley, and those who work in the shadows. All will be important in the coming chapters. Secondly, we saw, just as we did with Slothrop in Part 1 and 2 in Gravity's Rainbow, how they began their education into the world's evil reality. Before the events of Cape Town and St. Helena, they may have had some inkling about what their nation and other powerful nations were doing, but when they actually saw these things occur, there was no longer the excuse of ignorance. They have had their revelation, their epiphany, or whatever you may want to call it. They have returned home with these visions and insights, have seen how they were questioned by men in power, have been let in on ideologies of class consciousness, however minimal that type of consciousness may have been in that day, and have discussed with each other their fears of what they would be set to do in America. So now that they know all of this, once they see the project fully emerge in America, there will be no excuse for them to ignore reality or their own complicity. But we will see how they really react. And finally, the third purpose was to show the disparity between the material and spiritual worlds, the tangible and magical, that which we can see or explain, and that which we cannot. One cannot exist in the mind of man without the other, but so many attempt to live solely within one of these realms, and it ultimately breaks them. Mason mainly is the character who is trying to decipher his life by bringing them together. Dixon serves slightly as his foil by showing how the merging of these realms does not always produce what we would consider a fully sane or happy individual. That contrast is also present in the lands, the sciences, and the other characters within this novel and our world. Each of these motifs and themes will follow through to the Mason Dixon line, where we will see how the answers they provide and how the characters react to the answers will thus lead to what we now know as America, the land of the free. That's the end of Part 2, Chapter 0. Next week, we'll begin reading again, Part 2, Chapter 26. And a little side note here, in my analysis of Gravity's Rainbow, chapter numeration would reset with each new part. So, Part 1, Chapter 21, aka 1.21, would have proceeded into Part 2, Chapter 1, or 2.1. However, those chapters did not actually have numbers to them, and were simply broken apart by a series of sprockets. Here, however, in Mason and Dixon, we actually have chapter numeration, so instead of resetting with each chapter, I will label them with their part number and their actual numerated chapter number. So Part 1, Chapter 25, 1.25, and Part 2, Chapter 26, which is actually Part 2, Chapter 1, will be 2.26. This should be obvious, but I felt the need to explain since I did it differently with Gravity's Rainbow. So I'll see you next time for Part 2, Chapter 26. Thank you.